Catch up with Logan Paulsen, Washington Commanders team analyst on all things Washington Commanders coming out of this bye ahead of this weekend's matchup against the New Orleans Saints. All of that on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside today's bonus episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, also helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team this season. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. I thank you for coming through for today's episode, and to all the everydayers out there, I appreciate you coming through every day, especially in a week like this, where this is our 6th episode of the week. Actually, no, this is our 7th episode of the week. Sorry, I miscounted my own episode. So we've got a full stack of episodes dropping this week, and this one is just as important as the rest of them. Of course, Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. If you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we are going to be joined by Washington Commanders team analyst Logan Paulsen. You've also seen him on the Command Center podcast. Great conversation with other former players, head coach Dan Quinn doing film breakdowns with him. And you can also find him doing the Take Command podcast with Craig Hoffman. So always love having Logan Paulsen here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers of FanDuel, you place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Without further delay, let's bring in Washington Commanders team analyst Logan Paulsen. We're going to start it off with the man that everybody wants to talk about. Of course, we're going to get Logan's latest opinions on the development of quarterback Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's delivered more than I expected. I think, obviously with a rookie quarterback, especially number 2 overall, there's high expectations for sure. But, I come from, growing up watching football where the rookie quarterbacks always took a little bit of time to kind of find their feet. And for him to come out the way he did and kind of be breaking all those records in terms of passing efficiency and kind of no moment looks too big for him. I think back to that Cincinnati game, obviously, like that was a tremendous performance. And I know that Cincinnati defense is much maligned at this point, not overly effective, but still you got to go out and make the plays you got to make. It's just been really incredible. And I think, the things that make me really excited about him are the work ethic, the diligence, the professionalism, because it makes me feel like it could be sustainable. And again, I think CJ Stroud's a really good example of this, of a quarterback that, shows something really tremendous in year 1, but kind of falters in year 2 for whatever reason. And this is a long-term thing. And so when you show some of those intangible qualities, which he's shown kind of a ton of at this point, it makes me confident that he'll be able to kind of be successful long-term, which is ultimately what you're looking for if you're the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, 100%. And I think something that's really stood out to me about Jayden is, this team, Dan Quinn and everybody really kind of talked about how he doesn't need to wear the cape. He doesn't need to be the superhero for the team. And I've actually heard that before about a rookie quarterback. It was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers saying the same thing about Jameis Winston. And I think it was like by week 6, Jameis was doing it anyway. So just from that little, and that's a very small sample size in my experiences anyway. But like just from that, I was like, okay, but let's see if that really happens, or if like Jayden's personality really just kind of takes over. And it's been really cool to see like really everybody in this, even a guy like Bobby Wagner, like when he needs to lead, he absolutely takes the reins and leads. But when it's time for somebody else to shine, like maybe a Frankie Louvu, like he's more than willing to just be like, it's your time, dude. Like you be the leader today. So it's really been a lot of fun to watch. A lot of our growth just as individuals goes through adversity. And the first real adversity this team faced going on that 3-game losing streak, a lot of conversation about Jayden and Cliff Kingsbury's offense, that people figured it out. Is it the rib? Was it the hand? Was it the cold? You know what I mean? Like, is there a rookie wall? All these questions. Is that kind of how you saw it as well? I don't want to ask you to speculate on what it was that was bothering Jayden during that 3-game losing streak, but how do you think he's come out of that experience?
Well, I think in that case specifically, it's hard to separate him from the team. And what I mean by that is, like, I think the team kind of hit a little bit of a wall there. You're playing, 2 Super Super Bowl caliber teams in the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles, and those guys really looked tremendous, and I think it was somewhat encouraging for me. And I know there's no such thing as moral victories, and Dan Quinn would never abide by this, but for me, I thought, man, like this team is a little bit farther along than I thought. They're definitely kind of punching above their weight class, and I feel like the Pittsburgh game wasn't a bad game for Jayden Daniels. I really didn't think. I thought he actually played pretty well against a really good defense. Think about what they did to Lamar Jackson. Think about what that defense does to the top flight quarterbacks. They make them look very average. And I thought, had a very solid performance, a couple of drop passes, things like that. And the Philly game I thought was one that was really interesting because there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's a Thursday night game, Vic Fangio defense. You're going to get these kind of amorphous coverage structures. And, talking with guys like Matt Ryan, we've had him on our podcast once last year, and he was saying some of these kind of Vic Fangio, like too high structures are really, really hard because you don't know. You don't have the same kind of inside pre-snap that you did with kind of the more traditional coverage structure. So on a short week, I think that's really, really challenging for a young quarterback. And then obviously divisional game against Dallas, everyone looked like they all had a little bit of a hangover, And so I don't know if I credit Jayden with anything there specifically, but that's the problem. And I think that's the difficulty. And it's something that I really wish I could help fans understand. And you understand this a little bit, kind of working the beat and following the team. Is it so hard to win every week in the NFL? It's so incredibly challenging. And to keep that focus for 17 games, 18 weeks is really hard. And I think with a young quarterback, with a kind of a young team, with like younger pieces, you know what I mean? Not that they're like traditionally young, because you got Wagner, you got Ertz, but you got guys playing a lot of minutes that are young players, to come off two really challenging games and then say, oh, finally, like kind of exhale, we got the Dallas Cowboys. Like, that's college. That'll happen in college all the time. You'll win that game because you're just better. This is the NFL. Like, you got to get up again. And I think one thing that I'm really happy about that 3-game losing streak is it does feel like they learn from it, right? You come out, get Tennessee, and you do what you're supposed to do. And so if they needed those 3 games and that kind of messy loss to Dallas to figure out what it takes to win and kind of be a playoff caliber team, I think it's 100% worth it. So to me, I think in regards to Jayden and your initial question, I think it's the thing that sticks out to me is he's a guy that learns from his mistakes. And I feel like at least in the Tennessee game, he's learned from that. And so now, can he carry that lesson through the last 4 games?
Yeah, man. I mean, you just hit on a ton of great stuff, and I hope everybody listened to that. If you didn't listen to all of it, rewind it, listen to it again, because I mean, so many things hit there. Ultimate team sport, right? We all know the quarterback. It's all the credit, all the blame, but it's definitely on more than just the quarterback. That Pittsburgh Steelers game, man, I actually had conversations with fans here on Locked On Commanders about, I was like, that Steelers game wasn't actually that bad, like especially for Jayden and some of the play designs and things like that. And it was funny because I remember Cliff being asked questions after the Eagles game. Obviously, we didn't get him before the Eagles game, but it was like kind of like your offense struggled against Pittsburgh, against Philly, and he was kind of like, against Pittsburgh? Like, you really struggled? Logan, you know this. Fans are bold. I'll have conversations with fans, and not so much this year, but like in previous years, they'll be like, man, that player is trash. Why is he on the roster? Man, that player sucks. Why is he on the roster? I'm like, I think you need to understand how much talent it takes to be quote unquote trash in the National Football League. Like, it takes a lot of talent to not be good in the NFL. Obviously, this team's coming back from the bye week, and a common thread that's been asked, coaches and players this week in the media has it been hard to get going again? Has it been hard to get that little bit of a break and get the wheels going again? You've done that. You've lived that life and that experience. Is there any difficulty to that, or is it not as difficult as maybe some people might think? And how much does the fact that this team is in the playoff hunt help getting those motors going back after the break?
I think it's extremely helpful, and it is hard. I think like we just talked about how hard it is to kind of ramp up every single week for an NFL game, and you do develop kind of habits to do that. And so all of a sudden you get this time where you're kind of in it. You're like, I'm sure it's very similar kind of in boot camp, like you're a military guy, like in some ways where you're like in it, you can kind of deal with the suck. You're kind of in it, locked in, you're getting better every single week. And then all of a sudden you go and you see your wife and you see your kids and you go on a little vacation and you're like, man, this is what life feels like. And it feels like you're coming out of Plato's cave a little bit. And then it's like, oh, I got to go back in the dark and get that thing done. And that can be a little bit challenging. And I do think when I was younger, I had a harder time with it because I'm like, oh, this is 4 days off. Oh, my wife wants to go on a trip. Let's go to California. And then you come back, you're like, man, I'm thinking about California. And then as I got older, I was like, let's stick around here. Like let's spend time with the family. Let's do stuff here, but let's make it easier to kind of go back to what we were doing before. And I think that takes skill. And one of the things that I'm really excited about for this team is that they do have guys who've done a lot, Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner. They're consummate pros. I think they have good kind of roadmaps to handle that. And I think, Tana said this, and he's, such a smart guy. He's so quiet, but then he says like really insightful things sometimes. And he was like, it's the coach that leads you into the bye week, but it's really the players and the team that lead you out of it. And I think that's one thing about this team that I would, in my experience also that I would agree with Tana on that is, taking Bobby and having him kind of like set the tone for practice. And I think about Fletch in 2012 and how he handled everybody coming out of the bye and his level of professionalism. And you're like, oh, well, like we're back. Like, it's not like, man, it's like, we're back. And so I do think, is it challenging? Yes. Is this team equipped to handle it? I do think so. And do I think it's a relevant story point? Absolutely. And so I think it's one of the things that makes this game against New Orleans so interesting is it's like, oh, well, let's see the maturity of this team in a novel situation for the first time.
More to come on this special bonus episode of Locked On Commanders with Logan Paulsen. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can make your holidays bigger and brighter. The best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sport events, not just the NFL. They've got all kinds of sporting events to choose from on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Virginia, and Florida. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You don't have to win every single one of your lines on your tickets in order to get a win overall. In fact, you can double your money even if all your picks don't hit. And Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this season. So join now because the holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million during Picksmas. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download that Prize Picks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. If there's one thing I've learned about the Washington Commanders, about just the sports media landscape in general, is we are all a bunch of foodies. And I think football fans, a lot of us are foodies as well. With Omaha Steaks, you get guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now, you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with the promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites from legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners, you get an extra $30 off with the promo code NFL. That's $50, 50% off at omahasteaks.com, and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchases apply. Getting back now to our conversation with Logan Paulsen, Washington Commanders team analyst. But before we do that, I got to let you know, if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is sign up to be an insider today. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And from there, you're going to get direct access to me that goes well beyond the show, talking to insiders all throughout the week, all throughout game days, practices, press conferences, all the like, and insider-only exclusive Zoom conferences like we're going to have here in New Orleans on Saturday or Sunday morning. Haven't decided quite yet. Depends on the schedule, but we will be having one pregame. We'll be having one postgame. So again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to get in on that. Let's return now to our conversation with Washington Commanders team analyst Logan Paulsen. It's funny you mentioned like basic training, because when I went, I actually got to go home for Christmas. So about 3/4 of the way through my training, I got to go home for a little while. Then I had to come back. And I remember that first smoke session. For those who don't know, like when you're, doing the push-ups and the flutter kicks and the sprints in the mud, like those are called smoke sessions in the Army. Like I remember my first one, I was like, bro, what
am I doing here? Why am I here?
What is happening right now? Yeah, man. But then like my break for my first deployment, a little bit rough. My next deployment, a little bit less. My final deployment, like by my final deployment, bro, I had that thing locked on. I was locked down. So I know exactly how I'm doing this. I know exactly how I'm coming back. It was old business. So that's kind of probably where like Bobby Wagner is. But I also noticed younger guys, they tend to match energy, right? So if a younger guy comes back from that break and the energy around him is low, his energy is going to be low. Those guys who know that, like they come back with their energy high, even if they don't really want to have their energy high, because they're like, I can get back into it on Friday, I'll be all right. But they know that those younger guys need to see that to match that energy. So yes, that knowledge certainly comes in there. Obviously, an advantage of the bye week usually is you come back a little bit healthier. Brian Robinson Jr. getting a little bit of time off is certainly going to help his body. Andrew Wiley having time to continue going through his concussion protocol and coming back from that is going to be important. But then there's obviously the news of Noah Brown. And we're obviously all very happy that DQ says Noah is going to be okay from overall human health standpoint. That's first and foremost. But then you get to the football side of it. And, we started this conversation this season, Logan, with like this collective of number 2 receivers. And I think, obviously Zach is in there as a tight end, but when you look at the receiver room, specifically Noah has kind of been that number 2 guy. How big is that loss for this team? And do you think it's as simple as saying Diami, next man up? Because we talked about Cliff Kingsbury and his proclivity to line up guys in the same place. Like Diami is the guy who ranks second on the team in split wide right alignment snaps. So is it as simple as Diami's next man up, or is there a little bit of creativity here going on behind the scenes?
I definitely think it's going to have to be a bigger lift. And, it's funny how like the season changes your perspective on guys. And, I thought Noah Brown was a good player coming out of Houston. I really enjoyed watching his film, but I'm like, is he really a number 2? And then this year, I think he's kind of emphatically said yes, like that big body, the physicality that he blocks with, the contested catchability, the ability to win vertically down the field, and his ability to run a lot of different routes, run the dig, run the slant, run the hitch, run that deep comeback on the sideline, and really just be a incredibly reliable target for Jayden Daniels. I think has been incredible. And so I do think that losing him is a big deal. And I was thinking about that this morning. I was watching films of the receivers, and I'm like, man, we don't really have anybody on the roster, even with KJ Osborne coming in, that does what he does. So I do think like this will be an opportunity to see whether guys can step up. And Diami at times has shown a tremendous ability to win vertically and do some stuff. He had a really nice contested catch over the middle of the field versus Dallas, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. But can you do that for 60 snaps? Luke McCaffrey, you've shown really solid technical route running ability to make contested catches, but kind of from the Pittsburgh game on, there's some drops in there, some concentration issues. Can we mature kind of late in the season with that rookie wall kind of looming over us? I think a guy that I love is Zacchaeus, man. He's done a great job this year. Is he a true 2? Probably not, but in this situation where the guy goes down, can you step up and fill that role? So maybe it's a combination of those 3 guys. Because really, I mean, obviously it's a bummer that he's hurt. We're glad he's okay, Noah Brown, but he did a lot for this offense, a lot for this offense, and it's going to be really interesting. And this is where coaches earn their paychecks in terms of saying, how do we fill these big shoes vacated by his absence?
Yeah, 100%, man. I'm going to do an episode this weekend about, I'm going to kind of like, what if this ain't a death? Like, well, there's this option, there's that option, there's this option, but ultimately it's going to be on Cliff Kingsbury. And certainly there's options that I can't even think of that he knows that he may dive into. One option, not this weekend, but maybe in the future, Logan, we got to talk about it, brother. Odell Beckham Jr. The Dolphins and the veteran receiver have agreed to part ways. He's going to go through waivers. Washington is 20th in waiver order. According to Mike Garafolo, he would be owed $200,000 without incentives, and he's not particularly close to reaching a lot of those contract incentives. So is that a reasonable option? Should there be a conversation? I mean, I think there's going to be a conversation because AP and that staff just do their due diligence, but do you think that's realistic for any Commanders fan out there who's hoping maybe to see OBJ dressing up in burgundy?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I do think Adam Peters and the staff, have done a really, Lance also did a really good job of kind of their due diligence in finding guys. And I think just look at Noah Brown, look at that find. I mean, that's incredible. Great job by them. So I definitely think they'll kick the tires on it. I think with a guy like OBJ, and I don't know him personally, but I'm just saying kind of what his outward facing persona is from the media. He's a big personality. He's got a lot of kind of clout to him. You got to be really careful with someone like that. I'm not saying he's a bad teammate or anything like that, but those big personalities, late season additions, you got to make sure it's the right kind of guy. And there are guys that are big, loud, kind of outward facing, but they're excellent teammates. Like I think about Deshaun Jackson a little bit in that way. Like he was, again, a little bit kind of a personality outward facing, but in the locker room, in the meeting room, handled his business and really kind of integrated well with the locker room. And so maybe that's what you're getting there. And you got to kind of make your calls around the NFL and see if that's how he is. But he does kind of have this reputation of kind of seemingly like wearing out his welcome in spots, like he's there. There's very talented, obviously, but it doesn't quite work out that way. So I think, again, this is one thing I've really appreciated about this front office is, as you know, you've covered a lot of NFL teams, is they aren't looking for names necessarily. They're looking for talent. And I think that's a huge departure from what fans are looking for. Fans hear a name and they go like, it's like me taking my Spanish test in high school. It's like, I don't know all these words, but I know that word. So I think it's the answer. So I'm going to circle it. Right. But where you're looking for the right answer, you're looking for the right fit. And I think with the talent here, they've done a great job of finding talent. Are there any other receivers? Like I think KJ Osborne's like a really sneaky, nice find, right? Are there any other options that would maybe be a better fit? And I'm not saying OBJ's a bad fit, but I'm just reminding fans like it's about personality fit. It's about what they're looking for. It's about the blocking, the gritty, the finish, all those different things that every guy they've brought in has embodied. Is he that guy? I'm not sure, and I got to watch a little bit more tape to kind of give you a definitive answer. But to fans, if he came here, great. If he doesn't, there's a reason why, and I think you should trust Adam Peters with that solution.
Of course, we got to take a look with Logan at the New Orleans Saints matchup coming up this weekend. We've done a lot of conversing about this game, and we're not going to let Logan out of here before we do the same. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to take on the NFL action this weekend with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers to FanDuel, you bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. So while you're watching the games at home, if you get a hunch in the middle of the game that a player is going to break out or score a touchdown, or a team is going to turn the tide of a game or continue the tide of a game, you can go to FanDuel, you can place that live bet, but you can also get your live stats, you can get your live play-by-play, so much more information on the exact same site where you can then place that bet. The Washington Commanders are currently 7.5 points to beat the New Orleans Saints this weekend, so if you want to take that action, you can do that, or whatever it is you want to do, go to FanDuel.com, sign up today, and again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. We're all getting ready to go to New Orleans. The next big step for this Washington Commanders team is to get a win this weekend in the Big Easy. Do that, and I think the number goes like 87% according to NFL.com that you're going to the playoffs. Obviously, nothing clinched yet. But let's start offensively. No Derek Carr. The expectation is Jake Haener is going to be the starting quarterback. What dynamic does that present to an NFL team when you're looking at this opponent, and how much does it really matter when you consider that Alvin Kamara is the star of that show regardless?
Yeah, I think that's the thing I would kind of look at there is, I watched Haener has like 40 dropbacks this season. I watched all of them, and I actually think he's got some ability. He's got kind of a snappy release. He's got some moxie. He'll throw it into tight windows. He knows where the ball should go. And again, like from a backup quarterback, that's awesome. That's exactly what you're looking for. And I think he's a little bit more polished, a little bit more effective than Spencer Rattler, who again, I think Spencer Rattler has some really nice natural talent, but is from a kind of mental processing standpoint, I think Haener's a little bit farther ahead. And this really feels to me kind of like a Cooper Rush type of scenario, where you've got a backup who's established, maybe not the most talented guy in the whole world, but can function as an NFL quarterback, at least in these 40 dropbacks that I've seen. So I think he's got some ability, and I think you can't fall asleep on him. And, one of the things that Dan said in his presser, he said it, he reiterated it in when we taped the game plan, which airs on Sunday before kickoff. He was like, it's about the scheme, and it's about kind of the offensive foundation that you're trying to stop. And so I do think playing a backup quarterback can be challenging because they bring something a little bit different. The offense changes slightly, but I think you kind of look at like who they want to be. They want to be this run first kind of play action keeper team. They've gotten, as the season's gone on, they've gotten to a little bit more kind of spread out stuff, which is probably a function of Derek Carr. But I think if you understand that core tenet and you say, hey, this is a team that wants to run the football. They want to feature Alvin Kamara, and rightfully so. I think he's probably, in my estimation, like a top 4 back in the NFL, and he's doing a really nice job. Again, not breaking a ton of tackles, but his ability to kind of get skinny, find creases, be dynamic as a pass catcher is pretty tremendous too. So I think if you can figure out a way to stop him and kind of put more responsibility on Haener, I think that's the way you want to go in this game. Because while I think Haener has some ability, like there's a reason he's not starting in the NFL, and I think if you give him, you make him throw the ball 40 times, like that's something where he'll probably turn the ball over. He's not going to see something the same way because he doesn't have the experience that Derek Carr does. So to me, it all kind of starts with stopping, Alvin Kamara.
For what it's worth, I played this game on Madden, and Marshawn Lattimore had an interception on the third play of the game.
That's what I'm talking about.
And we know Madden is the most realistic, right? I mean, that's pretty much as close to real life as you're going to get. So that's it. That's probably going to happen. Defensively, when you look at the New Orleans Saints, Logan, where do they present their biggest challenge for Cliff, Jayden, and this offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's a solid group. I'm going to give it like a C minus. Like they're good. I think when you look at their front, they're getting a little bit older. Cam Jordan is still a good player, but definitely not what he was. Carl Granderson's the guy that's kind of taking his spot. I think he's a fun watch, man. He plays really hard. He's hard-nosed. He's aggressive to the football. He finishes. Cam Jordan plays that way when he does play, but he's not playing as much. The other guy on the other side is obviously Chase Young. I feel like that's kind of the two of the brighter spots in the front four. The interior guys, Saunders and Shepard, I think are good players, but the way they ask them to play is really challenging. They get moved off the ball a little bit, and when you watch, I feel like they have a hard time stopping the run. I think that's a big reason why they're kind of like read and react. And when you look at read and react players, teams that we've played this year, the Commanders have played this year, the offensive line's done really, really well. Obviously, Demario Davis at the linebacker level is a guy that really sticks out to you. Still playing, I mean, what is this year, like 13 or 14 for him? Still playing at a really high level. And Werner, the other guy from Ohio State, number 20, does a really nice job kind of playing off him, and they have a really good chemistry together. In the back end, they're kind of figuring some stuff out. I think they've got, some young players on the perimeter that are talented, but are inconsistent, like Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama. Good player, but, still a rookie kind of figuring some stuff out. So I think that kind of encapsulates the team. There's some things that you're excited about, some areas that aren't as good. And I think they're just a solid group. And I think they play a ton of man coverage, which is a little bit surprising, which is exciting for us as Commanders fans, because I think it's going to help Jayden Daniels kind of with scrambling opportunities and finding those man-to-man opportunities. But losing, this is where like losing Noah Brown becomes a little bit of an issue, because now do they kind of roll coverage? Do they play cloud to Terry? They did a little bit of that to Malik Neighbors up in New York. And do they try to force you into a box, which now they can do because you've lost some kind of dynamic playmakers. So I think they're a good defense. They're definitely not a great defense. They're not a bad defense. They play hard. And they can present some problems. They remind me they're a little bit better than like Dallas, for example. And Dallas, gave this team fits for 3 quarters when they played them. So, that's kind of my thoughts on that group.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you watch them, I think, Logan, because like this is a team, because I'm just an NFL guy. Like I just love, the NFL, dynamic. And this is a team where they like their next coaching staff is going to be really critical. Like whoever stays, whoever comes in, because especially defensively, like there's some good pieces there, like you mentioned. Yeah. And a guy like Brian Bresee really kind of is always been interesting to me, even coming out of Clemson. And it's like, but it just feels like they're not necessarily in the right fit all the time.
I was going to say, he's a really accentuated. He's a really good example, because obviously you see him block a field goal last week. You see him with a sack. You see him with a tackle for loss. But when he's not doing that, he's getting blown off the ball in the run game. You know what I'm saying? Because they've got him playing this kind of this read, react 3 technique as opposed to a penetrating, get up the field, like trying to make a play. So I 100% agree. They got talent. It's just, is it always being deployed correctly? And I think it leads to some of this kind of inconsistent play at times.
Yeah, exactly. Similar to the bye week conversation, Logan, playoff push. We all know it's there, right? And we know the players, like they know it's there. You as a player, you know when that's there. You know when that situation is there. How easy or difficult is it to really know that it's there, but push it into the back and say it doesn't matter?
Well, I think that's the thing that Dan, does such a great job of in the press conferences, and I'm sure when he's talking to the team, because there is something, and I said this on Take Command with Craig, there's something kind of liberating about a coach that's like, hey man, like it's today. Like, don't worry about anything else. It's today. And you're kind of like, okay, because I've had coaches do it both ways. I've had coaches where that's like, hey, we've got 4 games left. If we win 2 of them, like we're in the playoffs. And then you lose one of the games and you're like, oh shoot, like now what do we do? You know what I mean? And it kind of, it upsets the apple cart a little bit. And I think one of the things about just being where your feet are is you lose some of that distraction, because it is a distraction. And so, again, it depends on the environment, depends on the situation, but I do think Dan's like handling this like 100% the right way. I think you want to be, this is the most important game of the season. I think you just said it, right? If they win this game, there's like an 85% chance or 87% chance they make the playoffs. So why would I think about anything else? Like this is it. Right. A game that we should win versus a backup quarterback. Let's come out here and do what we do as Commanders. And I think that's the thing that I get super juiced up about, is because this is it. And then again, when you get to next week, we'll handle next week. But this is the most important thing. And for us as analysts, like it's great. We can talk about, oh, they got to win 2 or they got to win 3 or whatever it is. And I think that's important and it's fun. And it's what makes this game great. But as the leader of a team and a leader of men, like these are the decisions that I think make Dan Quinn special. Like these are the things that kind of differentiate him from some of the other coaching candidates, is saying like, how do I make sure my team is focused? I'm not going to talk about anything else. I'm not going to give them an opportunity to hear me say, oh, for the last 4 games, I want to see them be motivated. No, there's 1 game left. And I think that is a really good, professional, intelligent way to handle it. And as a player, a former player, I appreciate that clarity. You know what I mean? There's no gray about it. Like, this is who we are. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the goal for every team, right, is you want to be playing meaningful football next week. And the way to play meaningful football next week is to win this week. Period. It doesn't matter.
100%.
Yeah, I love the approach that Dan Quinn has to it. But at the same time, you watch Hard Knocks and Mike Tomlin, like it actually I actually laughed. First clip of Mike Tomlin, what is it? He's like, here's our next 5 opponents. Here's what we got to do to get to the postseason. And I'm like, look, it's different styles, but
it's different.
He is being authentic, right? Like DQ is DQ, and this is his mentality. This is his method. And that's why people buy into it.
So like when I was in Atlanta, DQ used to do the, hey, 5 games out. What do we got? Or quarters of the season.
Okay, there you go.
And obviously like it's the team, like we had Matt Ryan, we had Julio Jones. Yeah, well, let's look all the way down the roster. Who cares? But I think it's, to your point, it's understanding, being authentic to yourself and understanding the men that you're leading. And I think that's one of the things that DQ's done a great job this year.
He had team captains in Atlanta, like season-long team captains in Atlanta. He doesn't have them here because the circumstances dictate what you need to do as a leader, and having a flexible leader to do that mental agility is incredibly important. Logan Paulsen, brother, always appreciate your time. Always appreciate you coming through. Washington Commanders team analyst, if you don't know somehow. Command Center podcast, great conversations with other former NFL players, breakdowns of film with Dan Quinn. Those things are always amazing. And also the Take Command podcast with Craig Hoffman. Make sure you're searching out all that stuff that Logan has been doing. Logan, I appreciate you for coming through here. The most sought after guest on the entire Commanders beat. So always appreciate your time on Locked On Commanders.
You're too nice, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's always a great time.
Big thanks once again to Logan Paulsen for joining the show. Looking forward to seeing him down in New Orleans. Always look forward to seeing Logan wherever I get to see him. And I appreciate you coming through. I am going to get out another episode. We're going to talk about this wide receiver situation. How do the Washington Commanders go about replacing Noah Brown? There are a lot of different options, combinations of options. So we're going to dissect as many of them as we can on another episode before this game kicks off this weekend. So come back for that episode. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is shoot me a text message. To do that, all you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your next listen, make sure you check out the Locked On NFL podcast. It's twice a day. It's the all-new Locked On NFL. Tyler Rowland, Tony Wiggins, locking you down there for your national look at the National Football League. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.